The scene was a living nightmare, a deafening, terrifying tableau inside the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. It was the early hours of August 31st, 1997. Paramedic Jean-Marc Rousseau, a man whose professional life was built on swift, decisive action and mitigating chaos, was visually overwhelmed. The mangled black Mercedes, once a symbol of extreme wealth and power, was now a coffin of twisted metal. The heavy air, thick with the scent of ozone, petrol, and the sickening metallic tang of blood, choked the lungs. The silence from the tunnel walls, combined with the frantic energy of the scene, created a psychological pressure cooker. Jean-Marc's team worked with frantic, trained precision. Their initial focus was the back passenger seat. Dodi Fayed was lifeless. The driver, Henri Paul, was indistinguishable from the wreckage. But there she was, the princess, Diana, still breathing, barely. She was conscious, whimpering softly, her eyes wide, glassy, fixed on the confusion above her. As they initiated stabilization procedures, Jean-Marc completed his rapid trauma assessment. Severe chest and abdominal trauma, massive internal bleeding suspected, but her heart was beating. Strong and persistent, a testament to her fighting spirit. She needs a surgeon now, he thought, calculating instantly. The trauma center, Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital, was less than 2 miles away. At emergency speed, the journey was 6 minutes. Tops. This was a race against the clock, one they could easily win. The adrenaline was a familiar fuel, pushing him past exhaustion. They managed to extricate her carefully, securing her fragile form onto the rigid stretcher and slid her into the pristine, ordered environment of the ambulance interior. As the heavy doors clanged shut, shutting out the swirling chaos of flashbulbs, shouting police, and frantic security, a profound, isolated silence descended. Jean-Marc was alone with her, bathed in the harsh white light of the cabin. The silence amplified the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor, a desperate, fragile testament to life. Jean-Marc, mon ami? His colleague Pierre muttered into the small communication headset, his voice tight with panic. We need to move. Go code 3, 6 minutes. That's all we have to keep this woman alive. Jean-Marc nodded, reaching for the oxygen mask and the IV fluids, but before he could confirm the order, a sharp, authoritative click came through the emergency radio line, overriding their local channel. It was an unfamiliar voice, speaking in flawless cold French, with an accent Jean-Marc couldn't place, precise, military, utterly chilling. It sounded like an international satellite link, cutting through all local frequencies, demanding attention. Ambulance 27 Delta, stand by. Protocol is stabilized transport. No high-speed maneuvers. Repeat, stabilize. Delay arrival. Your current route priority is compromised due to unscheduled political asset movement in the city center. Jean-Marc froze, his professional instincts screaming defiance. He had never, in 12 years of service, heard an outside command override a Level 1 emergency transport decision, let alone one citing political assets. Who is this? He demanded into his mic, his voice tight with mounting fury. We have a royal, a severe casualty. She is critical. We need immediate high-speed transport. I am the lead paramedic, and I am ordering immediate transport. The voice was pure, crystalline ice, devoid of humanity, a calculated machine. Your duty is to the integrity of the operation, Paramedic Rousseau. Her condition is being monitored remotely by a dedicated team. Follow standard stabilization protocol. Maintain current location for 5 minutes. Do not proceed to the hospital at this time. Unauthorized acceleration will result in immediate termination of command and investigation into procedural misconduct, specifically negligence regarding Protocol 7 Deltas. A cold dread, heavier than any trauma he had ever faced, settled in Jean-Marc's stomach. This was not normal. This was not standard procedure. They were being ordered to slow down. They were being ordered to let her bleed. They want her to die here. The thought flashed, terrifying and undeniable. Not in their hospital, not under their care, but here, passively, in my hands. I am to be their instrument. They have a protocol for this. Jean-Marc ignored the command on the radio and began an immediate IV drip, working faster, his movements becoming frantic, his mind racing. If I fail her now, they will destroy my career. If I obey them, she dies. I will not obey. He started the blood pressure reading and recorded the time. 0:45 a.m. The countdown had begun. He could feel the eyes of the remote monitors on his every movement, analyzing his defiance. He worked feverishly on the blood transfusion, praying the delay wouldn't nullify his efforts, administering emergency pain medication, knowing it was a risk but seeing the princess's silent agony. The ambulance stood still. Jean-Marc fought the impulse to scream at Pierre to drive. He looked down at Diana. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, but her eyes fluttered open, locking onto his. There was no panic in them, only a terrible, vast comprehension. She knows what is happening to her. He realized with a fresh wave of horror. She is aware of the sabotage, the silent forces at work, even in this state. He spoke softly to her in French, reassuring her, "Princesse, hold on. We are preparing the route. We will get you there." She shook her head weakly, a gesture of profound resignation. They, she managed to whisper. Jean-Marc desperately tried to keep her talking, to keep her focused. "Who, princess? Who did this to you? Name them." She coughed. A terrible wet sound, and a fresh fear gripped Jean-Marc, the danger of her losing consciousness before the truth could be told. He knew the next 5 minutes were critical to her. Survival. The voice returned, even sharper, the patience gone, the tone overtly threatening. 27 Delta. Deviation noted. Proceed immediately at low-speed transport. Take the circuitous route via the Quai d'Orsay. Maintain a conservative pace. Do not engage sirens. This is the last advisory. Further deviation will initiate automatic disciplinary procedures against you and your partner, Pierre Dumont. Naming Pierre was the second psychological blow. They knew his team. They were watching his family. The Quai d'Orsay route, winding slowly past the Louvre and the Musée d'Orsay, would add a guaranteed 30 minutes. Jean-Marc felt a profound moral revulsion. He spoke softly to Pierre. "Pierre, take the Quai d'Orsay, yes. But find me every service road, every dark alley. Ignore the slow order. Go as fast as you can without sirens, please. Our only chance is speed." Pierre, white-faced and terrified for his family, reluctantly obeyed. The ambulance began its agonizing slow crawl through the Parisian night, its speed barely exceeding that of a bicycle. Inside, Diana's pulse was slowly weakening. Jean-Marc performed an emergency thoracostomy, a high-risk, forbidden procedure for a simple paramedic, to relieve the tension pneumothorax, a desperate, rebellious act he knew saved her life for another 20 minutes. He was now operating illegally, solely on the dictates of his conscience. He ignored the incessant static and the increasingly furious coded commands on the override channel. "They cannot save her if she is already dead," he reasoned. "They want me to watch her fade. I will not be the one to sign her death certificate with inaction." Jean-Marc was working against the clock and the chilling voice on the radio, which now seemed to speak directly into his mind. Diana's blood pressure was plummeting further. The overriding voice suddenly crackled back, specifically addressing Jean-Marc, its tone chillingly personal. "Rousseau, your immediate deviation from authorized protocol is noted. Your reckless trauma procedure is unauthorized and placing the asset in further jeopardy. Cease all non-stabilizing intervention. We are aware of your financial obligations, paramedic. Your retirement pension, your children's university funds, all are contingent upon your immediate compliance. Your insubordination will have consequences for your loved ones." It wasn't just a threat to his job. It was a threat to his family, his entire life's work. Jean-Marc's hands paused for a split second, the enormity of the risk hitting him. He remembered his daughter Marie leaving for university next week, the pride he felt. He pushed the fear down and resumed his work, his voice strained. "I am a paramedic. My duty is to the patient, not to an anonymous voice." Diana's eyes flickered open again, noticing his struggle, recognizing the fear he was fighting. She tried to lift her head, making a desperate sound that was half a cough, half an urgent plea. She understood the conversation was not medical, but political. Diana's pulse began to fall rapidly despite Jean-Marc's desperate efforts. Her body was giving out. The thoracostomy had bought time, but the internal hemorrhaging was too severe. Jean-Marc knew he had less than 5 minutes before irreparable damage occurred. He leaned over her, his own face bathed in sweat and fear. "Princess, we are almost there. Please, hold on. Who is it? Just tell me who ordered this delay. I need the truth." Her eyes once again opened and locked onto his. He saw the fire dying, but the clarity remained, fierce and accusatory. In that agonizing final moment of lucidity, she gathered her last reservoir of strength. She knew her time was measured not by nature, but by the conspirators on the radio. She didn't name a person. She didn't point a finger at a known antagonist. She formed a single, devastating, broken sentence, a barely audible whisper that froze Jean-Marc's blood, not from shock, but from the immense scale of the truth. The firm, they wanted ERASE. The word erase, confirming her long-held fears of institutional elimination, hung in the cold air. She was confirming the conspiracy with her final conscious breath, and then she managed one last, single, chilling word. It wasn't a name. It was a phrase. A chilling code Jean-Marc had only ever heard used in high-level diplomatic circles when discussing the removal of destabilizing elements to national interests. It was the name of the operation, the cold, bureaucratic justification for murder. She used the last ounce of her life to ensure this one word was heard, a legacy of accusation intended for his ears only. OPERATIONSTABILITY. Her eyes went vacant. Her hand, which had weakly grasped his, went slack. The monitor flatlined. The finality of the long, drawn-out beep of the flatline was the sound of the operation's success. After 40 agonizing, wasted minutes, they were finally pulling into the emergency bay of Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. The final damning time. 01:25 a.m. The arrival was chaos, a frantic ballet of surgeons and nurses. Doctors swarmed the ambulance, furious at the time delay. Jean-Marc, numb with shock, guilt, and the weight of the word stability, was immediately intercepted by two official-looking men. They were neither hospital staff nor local police, and they spoke perfect, unaccented English, confirming their non-French, intelligence-linked origins. The logbook, Paramedic Rousseau, the first man said, his voice quiet, sharp, and utterly devoid of empathy, and the audio recorder. We require all documentation regarding the transport protocol. Immediately. Do not speak of the radio anomaly. You saw nothing unusual. You were following standard procedure. You will confirm your adherence to Protocol 7 Delta. Jean-Marc, still hearing Diana's final, broken word echoing in his skull, handed over the required materials. He knew then that the cover-up was already in motion. They hadn't just delayed her, they had successfully executed a calculated, cold-blooded plan to ensure she did not survive the ride to expose the forces that wanted her erased. He glanced at Pierre, whose face was a mask of terror, the implicit threat against his family already understood. Days later, Jean-Marc's life began to unravel. He received an anonymous phone call. No voice, just a distorted static that carried a specific, chilling message, the address of his child's school, the time they were dismissed, followed by a dial tone. The threat was clear. He was alone, fighting a vast, invisible enemy. He resigned 6 months later, his soul hollowed out by the crushing guilt of complicity. He became a ghost, unable to look his wife and children in the eye. The cold, wet silence of that ambulance always returned in his nightmares. Each beep of the monitor replaced by Diana's final whisper. He never told anyone the name of the operation she whispered. It was too massive, too unbelievable. Operation Stability. It would destroy him and his family. He tried to convince himself that she had been delirious, that the word was just a meaningless jumble of sounds, a dying woman's final, desperate attempt at language. But he remembered her eyes, the clarity, the desperate comprehension, the final accusation. 20 years later, Jean-Marc Rousseau was a shell of a man, alone in his retirement home in Brittany. He watched a documentary about the crash, the same tired narrative playing out. Speed, alcohol, fate. He looked at the framed picture of his family, then at his own trembling hands, and finally made his decision. He had a duty to Diana that he failed in the ambulance. He would not fail her memory now. He had kept one thing from those officials, the small, private dictaphone he wore strapped under his uniform, which captured not the local channel, but the faint, overriding radio frequency. He still had the recordings. He pulled the worn device from its hiding place, its plastic casing yellowed with time. He pressed play. The cold, clinical voice was still there, loud and clear, ordering the delay. And then, fainter, clearer than ever, was the princess's final, coherent whisper. Operation Stability. Jean-Marc Rousseau knew he was signing his own death warrant by going public, but the guilt was finally replaced by the cold, hard resolve of a man finally ready to tell the truth. He called a journalist he knew to be independent and fiercely trustworthy. "I know why the ambulance took 40 minutes, he whispered into the phone. "And I know the name of the operation that killed her. His hands were steady now. The princess died not because of the crash, but because a calculated, cold-blooded decision was made to ensure she did not survive the ambulance ride to expose the forces that wanted her erased. And Jean-Marc Rousseau, the former paramedic, was the only living witness to the ultimate royal conspiracy, now ready to sacrifice everything for the truth.